The galactic learning hall drifted slowly through space. It was a wide structure made of metal and light, built far from any star. Inside it, young minds from many worlds came to learn about the universe. They studied stars, trade, culture, and history. Most lessons were calm and safe. War was something distant for many of them. The students entered the hall in small groups. Some had tall, thin bodies, others were short and wide. Some walked, some floated, and some moved with soft mechanical sounds. They talked in low voices, sharing jokes and stories. Today's subject was a new one, the history of Earth. Many of them had never heard much about Earth. It was a small blue world on the edge of a busy star lane. It had water, storms, and many scars on its surface. From space, Earth looked wounded. Cracks, dark marks, and old damage covered parts of the land. Because of this, many students believed Earth was weak. They took their seats as the instructor arrived. The instructor was old and calm, with slow movements and steady eyes. He had taught many species over many cycles. He did not smile often. When he did, it usually meant something serious was coming. Today, the instructor said, we begin the study of humans. A low wave of sound moved through the room. Some students laughed quietly. Others looked confused. Humans, one student whispered, from Earth. I heard their world almost destroyed itself, another said. They are still alive, someone joked. The instructor raised a hand and the room slowly became quiet. Earth is a young world, he said. Humans are a young species. They reached space later than most of you, but they have survived things that would have ended many civilizations. The students exchanged looks. Survival alone did not sound impressive. Many worlds had faced disasters and lived on. The instructor activated the central display. A large image of Earth appeared, blue oceans, green lands, white clouds. This lesson will focus on one topic only, the instructor said, combat history. The room reacted at once. Some students leaned forward with interest. Others relaxed, expecting simple stories. Primitive wars, one student said softly, sticks and stones. Yes, another replied, this will be short. The instructor heard them but said nothing. He adjusted the display. The image changed. The first scenes showed early humans. Small groups, simple tools. They hunted animals larger than themselves. They fought predators with fire and sharp stones. Even then the humans did not run easily. When threatened, they worked together. A few students frowned. Hunting large creatures without natural weapons felt risky. The scenes moved forward in time. Human tribes grew into cities. Cities turned into nations. Weapons changed. Sharp stones became metal blades. Wood shields became walls. The scale of fighting grew. Why do they fight each other so often? A student asked. For land, another answered, or power. The instructor remained silent as the display continued. Battles appeared, thousands of humans facing each other. Dust and smoke filled the air. The sounds were loud even through the recording. Cries, metal striking metal, and the thunder of movement. Some students shifted in their seats. They had seen conflict before, but this felt different. The humans did not flee when injured. Many kept fighting even when wounded. The display zoomed in on a single human soldier. The soldier was bleeding, holding a broken weapon. Still, the human stood in front of others, blocking an attack. The image froze. Why did he not retreat? One student asked. The instructor spoke. Because behind him were others who could not fight. The image resumed. The soldier fell. The others survived. The room grew quieter. The timeline moved forward again. Weapons became louder and deadlier. Explosions replaced blades. Entire cities burned. Smoke rose into the sky. A student near the back whispered, "They destroy their own homes." "Yes," the instructor replied, "and they rebuild them, again and again." The class watched as humans entered an age of machines. Vehicles, aircraft, and massive weapons filled the screen. Wars became global. No place was truly safe. One student covered their eyes when images of ruined cities appeared. Towers collapsed, roads broke, fire consumed everything. "Why do they continue?" the student asked. The instructor answered slowly, "Because surrender does not come easily to them." The lesson showed a period where Earth nearly fell into darkness. Resources were scarce. Millions died. Still, humans kept moving forward. Even in their worst moments, some helped strangers. Others stood against impossible odds. A new silence settled in the hall. No one laughed now. The instructor paused the display. "This is only the early phase of their history," he said. Some students looked uneasy. Others leaned forward, drawn in despite themselves. "Homework," the instructor continued. "You will review the first 1,000 cycles of Earth combat history. Pay attention to patterns, not just weapons but behavior." A wave of discomfort moved through the room. 1,000 cycles, someone repeated. "Yes," the instructor said. "Tomorrow we continue." The display shut down, the lights brightened, the students stood slowly. No one spoke much now. Small groups formed, but their voices were low. One student, smaller than the rest, stayed behind. They stared at the dark display screen. "You stayed," the instructor said. "I want to understand," the student replied. "Why they fight even when they are losing." The instructor looked at the student for a long moment. "Because humans believe some things are worth more than life," he said. The student did not respond. Later that cycle, many students returned to their living quarters. Some tried to relax, some tried to joke, but the images stayed in their minds. One student activated their private screen and began the homework early. They expected short clips and simple notes. Instead, the screen filled with more battles, more loss, more resistance. They watched humans fight in frozen lands and burning deserts. They saw humans march even when exhausted. They saw them sing, write, and joke between fights. The student felt something unfamiliar. Unease mixed with respect. Another student nearby noticed the light from the screen. "You are studying already?" they asked. "Yes," the first student replied, "and I think we were wrong about Earth." The second student looked at the screen and went quiet. Across the academy, similar scenes happened. Screens glowed in dark rooms. Faces reflected fear and disbelief. No one slept easily that cycle. Far away, beyond the academy, a small blue world continued to turn. Its surface still showed scars, but life thrived. Humans lived, argued, loved, and remembered their past. And slowly, across the stars, others were beginning to understand what those scars truly meant. The next cycle, the Galactic Learning Hall, was unusually quiet. Students entered the classroom in smaller groups than usual. Many glanced at each other nervously, still thinking about the previous lessons on human combat. The instructor waited at the front, calm as ever, his eyes scanning the room. "Today," he said, "we study the development of human weapons and tactics." Some students shifted in their seats. They expected to see simple stories about sticks, stones, and early tools. Instead, the display activated, showing humans learning to make metal weapons. The earliest swords and spears appeared. Walls were built for defense. Humans adapted quickly. They learned from every mistake. The students leaned forward. One whispered, "They are not just strong, they learn fast." The display shifted to show larger battles. Armies faced each other in wide fields. Strategy became important. Humans moved in groups, flanking and surrounding opponents. They built traps and barriers. They created formations that were studied for centuries. "Why do they fight like this?" a student asked. "It is too dangerous." The instructor replied, "Because humans value cooperation and planning. They understand risk but do not fear it entirely." Scenes showed humans losing battles but surviving by retreating in groups or using clever tricks. The students saw humans feinting, deceiving, and striking at the right moment. Many students frowned. Such tactics were foreign to them. Most species relied on strength, speed, or size, not strategy and cunning. The lesson continued, showing humans building machines for war. Wheels, carts, and catapults appeared. They expanded into larger territories, encountering other humans with different skills. Alliances formed, then broke. Betrayal and trust were both present. A small student leaned forward. They do not stop even when it seems hopeless. Why? The instructor's eyes were steady. Because they fight not only for themselves but for others. Family, community, ideas. They risk themselves for more than survival. The class watched in silence. The previous laughter and jokes were gone. Even the strongest, tallest students were unsettled. They had studied war in other civilizations, but humans were different. Other species fought for power, survival, or territory. Humans fought for something deeper. The display moved to more modern times. Humans learned to make firearms, cannons, and explosives. Cities were attacked and rebuilt. Entire populations were mobilized for defense. Humanity's ability to recover from defeat was unlike anything the students had seen. One student whispered to another, "They destroy and rebuild. They adapt faster than we do." "Yes," the second student replied, "and they survive." The display showed moments when humans worked together against a stronger enemy. They used intelligence, speed, and courage. Some humans acted as decoys to protect others. Some volunteered for dangerous tasks that others would avoid. Even when outnumbered, humans did not surrender easily. Another student, taller and broad, leaned back and crossed their arms. "This is dangerous. They are reckless." "They are not reckless," a smaller student said quietly. "They are prepared. They know the cost but still act." The instructor paused the lesson. "Observe the pattern," he said. "Humans do not rely only on strength. They rely on learning, adaptation, and unity." The room fell silent. No one dared speak for several moments. The students realized they had underestimated humans. Their assumptions about weakness were incorrect. Humans were not just survivors, they were relentless and clever. The lesson continued with humans moving into industrial age wars. Machines of steel, guns, and bombs changed the battlefield. Humans adapted tactics to machines. They built shields, dug trenches, and coordinated attacks. Even when facing technologically superior enemies, humans found ways to fight effectively. One alien student raised a question. "Why do they keep fighting when they can negotiate?" The instructor's voice was calm but firm. "Because humans value action. Words matter, but deeds define them. They protect what they believe in. Words alone are not enough." The students watched human courage unfold on the screens. Soldiers and civilians alike faced impossible situations. Communities rose to defend their homes. Leaders emerged from ordinary people. Even children contributed in small ways to survival and resistance. The depth of human determination shocked the students. A group of students whispered among themselves, fear mixed with admiration. The more they learned, the more they understood that humans could never be judged by appearances. Strength was not always in muscle or size. It was in mind, spirit, and will. The instructor concluded the lesson with one final point. Study not only the weapons but the choices. Humans often face impossible odds and still act. They are not predictable, they are adaptable, and this makes them formidable. The students left the hall slowly, many in silence. They returned to their quarters, carrying images and thoughts that would not leave them. Some students began reviewing the recordings again, unable to stop. Curiosity and unease battled within them. One student quietly replayed a battle where humans had been surrounded by a stronger force. Humans seemed doomed, yet they survived through cunning and teamwork. The students shook their head. "They never give up," they whispered. Another student watched, feeling a strange respect. Fear mingled with fascination. "We thought they were weak," they admitted. "But they are not." Across the academy, the quiet spread. Screens glowed in dim rooms, showing humans fighting, surviving, and protecting. The stories were not of victory alone, but of courage, sacrifice, and unity. The instructor walked through the hallways observing. He saw students whispering, staring at the stars, thinking of humans and their wars. He knew the lesson had taken hold. Earth's combat history was not just about battle. It was about the human spirit, and now the students could feel it. Outside the academy, the stars continued to shine. The blue planet at the edge of the galaxy remained alive and scarred. Humans on its surface worked, argued, and survived. And far away, alien students began to understand that humans were more than they appeared. They were a species that could not be easily broken, no matter how hard the universe tried. The third cycle began with a sense of tension in the Galactic Learning Hall. Students arrived quietly, their movements careful and measured. The images of human combat history from previous lessons lingered in their minds. Even those who had laughed before were now silent. The instructor stood at the front, his eyes scanning the room, calm as always but aware of the unease. "Today," he said, "we study humans in the space age, observe their ability to adapt to new environments and challenges." The display lit up, showing humans venturing into the skies. They built machines that could fly above clouds and across oceans. They explored the world from above, learning to fight in new ways. The students watched carefully. Flying machines were unfamiliar to many of them. They had weapons that humans had never encountered on their home worlds. Scenes shifted rapidly. Humans used their flying machines to fight enemies in the air. They attacked large fleets and often won through clever maneuvers rather than sheer power. Many students leaned forward, whispering to each other. "They are smaller," one student said, "but they control larger forces." "Yes," another replied, "and they do it with precision." The display changed again. Humans were now in space, leaving their home world but taking the same spirit with them. Ships moved through darkness, facing creatures and threats far larger than themselves. Humans adapted quickly, learning from each encounter. Even when outnumbered, they survived by using speed, coordination, and sacrifice. A tall student folded their arms. "They are reckless. Too small to face these dangers." "They are not reckless," a smaller student whispered. "They plan, they observe, they act at the right moment." The room grew tense. The students realized that humans did not need to be large or powerful to succeed. Intelligence, courage, and teamwork made them formidable. The display now focused on individuals, humans risking their lives to protect others. One ship stayed behind to defend another. Soldiers took positions that endangered themselves but saved their comrades. The students watched silent as humans demonstrated courage in the face of overwhelming odds. One student finally spoke. "They are dangerous, not because they are strong, but because they never stop." The instructor nodded. "Exactly. Humans have the ability to endure. They have a will that is not easily broken. Observe their choices, not just their weapons." Arguments broke out among the students. One argued that humans were still primitive and should be studied cautiously. Another insisted that humans were dangerous and could not be underestimated. The debate grew heated, voices raised, gestures made. The instructor raised a hand and silence returned. "Discussion is important, but judgment comes later. Today, observe. Tomorrow, we will study their tactics against other species." The students turned back to the display. More battles appeared. Human ships moved through asteroid fields, dodging attacks and striking with precision. The students noticed that humans were not always the fastest or strongest. Their success came from adaptability and willingness to face risk. A student whispered, "They face death calmly. I have never seen a species act like this." The instructor walked slowly among the students. "Humans understand that life is valuable, but some things are worth more than life itself. Protection, freedom, and loyalty are ideas they fight for." The lesson shifted to show humans uniting when facing stronger enemies. Other species that had attacked humans were larger and more advanced. Humans formed alliances, learned quickly, and used clever tactics to survive. One fleet of humans, outnumbered 3 times over, managed to escape a trap and strike back later, turning the battle in their favor. The students were quiet. Many replayed scenes in their minds. Humans, small and fragile-looking, were surviving and winning against impossible odds. Their determination was unlike anything the students had ever studied. One student shook their head. "I thought they were simple. Weak, but they think, they act, they endure." "Yes," a nearby student replied, "and they do not fear what comes, they prepare and adapt." The instructor paused the display. "Observe, learn, the patterns are important. Humans fight not because they want war, but because they refuse to lose their freedom and protect what they love." The classroom fell silent. Even the most confident students were no longer joking or whispering. The weight of human courage and ingenuity settled over them. They were beginning to understand that humans were more than they had assumed. At the end of the cycle, the instructor gave one final note. "Study these lessons carefully. Humans are unpredictable but predictable in their resolve. They survive through intelligence, courage, and unity. Remember this when we meet them in your simulations." Students left the hall slowly. Their thoughts were heavy. Some returned to their quarters to review the recordings. Others stared at the stars, thinking of humans and their battles. Fear, respect, and curiosity mingled in their minds. In private rooms, small groups of students watched humans in the space age. They saw humans facing impossible enemies, making choices that ensured survival and protection. Each story increased their understanding and at the same time their unease. One student whispered to another, "We underestimated them. I see now why the instructor warned us." Another nodded, eyes wide. "We cannot judge them by size or strength. They survive because they refuse to fall." Across the academy, a quiet tension spread. Alien students who had once laughed at humans were now silent. They replayed images in their minds, feeling the human will, determination, and bravery. The simple assumption that Earth was weak no longer held. Humans had something far more dangerous than weapons. They had spirit. Outside the academy, the blue planet turned silently in space. Humans lived, worked, and prepared. Across the galaxy, others were beginning to understand that the humans were not weak. They were relentless, unpredictable, and capable of surviving what no one else could. The fourth cycle began with a heavy silence across the galactic learning hall. Students entered the classroom slowly, their eyes avoiding direct contact. The images of humans in past lessons lingered in their minds. The instructor stood at the front, calm but aware that the mood had changed. The students were no longer curious or playful. They were tense, almost fearful. "Today," the instructor said, "we examine the humans' response to threats beyond their planet. Observe how they unite, even when facing enemies stronger than themselves." The display activated, showing humans in the first interstellar encounters. Small fleets traveled cautiously through space. Their ships were modest, but the humans had learned to adapt quickly to new threats. They faced other species, some larger, some faster, some with technology humans had never seen before. The students watched in silence, unable to look away. "They are small," one student whispered. "How do they survive?" "They learn," another replied quietly. "They study, adapt, and fight together." Scenes showed humans forming alliances with other species when needed, even former enemies. Humans were careful negotiators, but they never gave up their principles. When danger appeared, they prepared. They trained, built new ships, and planned strategies. Every encounter showed their determination and their ability to survive against overwhelming odds. A student near the back, usually loud and confident, sat in stunned silence. "They do not panic," they murmured. "Even when surrounded, they act with purpose." The instructor nodded. "Humans do not always have the strongest fleets or the largest weapons. They survive because of planning, courage, and the willingness to take calculated risks." The display shifted to more intense battles. Humans faced enemies that vastly outnumbered them. Entire cities in space were under attack. Humans used clever tactics. They created diversions, hid their movements, and attacked at the precise moment. They protected civilians and weaker ships, often putting themselves in danger. A student whispered, "They risk everything for others. That is different." "Yes," another replied. "We do not understand this. Most species fight for power or survival. Humans fight for more." The lesson moved on to show humans adapting technology in the middle of battles. They changed weapons, repaired ships quickly, and learned from every encounter. Each time they faced a setback, they found a new solution. The students realized humans did not simply react. They learned, they improved, and they endured. The room was silent. The students were no longer comparing humans to themselves. They were beginning to respect, even fear, the human will and adaptability. One student raised a question. Why do they fight when they could leave or surrender? The instructor's voice was calm but firm. Because humans have values. Freedom, protection of their kind, and ideas are worth the risk of death. They act, even when defeat seems likely. The display now showed humans coordinating with each other across vast distances. They shared knowledge, warned allies, and planned joint attacks. They were not simply fighting to survive. They were fighting to protect, to endure, and to prove that they could not be easily defeated. The students whispered among themselves, fear mixed with admiration. One student, smaller and usually quiet, said softly, "I think they are preparing. Their silence is not weakness, it is patience." "Yes," another replied. "They wait, learn, and then act. That is dangerous." The instructor paused the display. "This is the key lesson. Humans are not predictable, but they are consistent in one thing: they will endure, they will adapt, they will fight for what matters to them." The students left the classroom slowly. Their minds were heavy with thoughts. Some returned to their quarters to review the recordings. Others wandered the hallways, staring at the stars, imagining humans and their determination. In private rooms, groups of students gathered quietly. They replayed scenes of human alliances, clever tactics, and courage in the face of impossible odds. The more they watched, the more they realized humans were not just fighters. They were thinkers, learners, and protectors. One student whispered, "We thought they were weak, but they are more dangerous than we imagined." Another nodded, eyes wide. "It is not just their weapons. It is their will, their unity, and their spirit." Across the academy, a quiet tension grew. Alien students who had once mocked Earth were now silent. They avoided joking or casual conversation. Humans had changed their understanding of survival, courage, and strength. The stories of battle, ingenuity, and sacrifice were unlike anything they had studied before. Outside the academy, the blue planet continued its slow turn in space. Humans lived, worked, and prepared, sometimes unaware of the attention they had drawn. Alien students were beginning to understand that the humans were not just survivors. They were unpredictable, determined, and capable of enduring what no one else could. As the cycle ended, the instructor gave one final note. Observe the humans' patience and preparation. They will not be easily defeated. Remember what you have seen. It will guide your understanding in future encounters. The students left the hall, silent and thoughtful. Fear, respect, and curiosity mingled in their hearts. Across the academy, the understanding was spreading. Humans were not to be underestimated. Their spirit, courage, and unity made them formidable, even to those who had once thought them weak. The fifth cycle began with a heavier silence than ever before. Students entered the galactic learning hall slowly, their expressions serious. The memories of previous lessons on human combat and adaptability lingered in their minds. Even those who had been confident in their knowledge now walked carefully, as if stepping into unknown territory. The instructor stood at the front, calm but aware that today's lesson would mark the end of this series of studies. "Today," the instructor said, "we observe humans after first contact with other species. Their response, preparation, and choices reveal much about their spirit. The display lit up, showing humans engaging with other species. Humans were cautious but resilient. They explored new worlds and made alliances when necessary. They shared knowledge and coordinated efforts across long distances. Even when faced with species that had greater technology, humans adapted and survived. The students watched intently, recognizing patterns of strategy and endurance. One student, usually brash, whispered, "They are patient. They wait and prepare before acting. That is dangerous." "Yes," another replied. "Their silence is not weakness, it is calculation." The display moved to humans facing a threat that could have ended their species. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched in every way. But humans coordinated with other species, created clever strategies, and risked themselves to protect others. Each choice reflected courage and intelligence. They fought not just for survival, but for their ideals and for each other. A smaller student leaned forward. "They fight not because they want war. They fight because some things are worth more than life." The instructor nodded. "Precisely. Humans value protection, freedom, and loyalty. They endure because of these values. Observe how their decisions define them more than their weapons." Scenes shifted to humans preparing for potential future conflicts. They trained, studied other species, and built fleets capable of defending themselves. They prepared silently, with patience and intelligence, without seeking unnecessary confrontation. The students realized that human strength was in preparation and resilience, not just in power or numbers. One student whispered to another, "They are not reckless. They calculate every move, but they do not hesitate when action is needed." "Yes," the other replied softly, "and that makes them unpredictable. That makes them formidable." The display showed humans collaborating across different planets and species. They shared knowledge, warned allies of dangers, and coordinated defensive and offensive strategies. Even ordinary humans contributed. Civilians helped in logistics, intelligence, and support. Every individual played a part, and every part mattered. The students began to understand that the human spirit was collective, resilient, and unwavering. The room was silent. Students were no longer whispering or comparing humans to themselves. They were absorbing a truth that was difficult to accept. Humans were not weak. They were not simple. They were survivors with courage, intelligence, and a unity that made them unpredictable and formidable. One student, quiet and reflective, said softly, "We thought we understood them, but we were wrong. They are more than we imagined." Another nodded. "They survive because they refuse to fall. They endure what others cannot. That is their true strength." The instructor paused the display. "Remember this lesson. Humans may appear fragile, but they are not. Their history teaches us that the will to protect, the ability to adapt, and the courage to act define a species. These qualities make humans formidable, not just in combat but in spirit." As the cycle ended, the students left the hall in silence. Many returned to their quarters, replaying the recordings and reflecting on what they had learned. Some stared at the stars, imagining the humans and their determination. Fear, respect, and curiosity filled their minds. They realized that humans were not to be underestimated or dismissed. The blue planet at the edge of the galaxy was home to a species that could survive, adapt, and endure against incredible odds. Across the academy, the understanding spread quietly. Alien students who had once mocked or dismissed humans now thought carefully before speaking of Earth. Humans were no longer a subject of simple study. They were a warning and a lesson. They were a species that had earned the attention and respect of others across the stars. Far away on the blue planet, humans continued their lives. They built, explored, argued, and loved. They remembered their history and they prepared silently for the future. They did not know how closely they were being watched, or how their history had changed the perception of other species. The instructor watched as the students filed out of the hall. He knew they would never forget what they had learned. Humans had shown that survival was not merely about strength or technology. It was about spirit, courage, unity, and the will to endure. And now, those lessons would echo across the galaxy, in the minds of every alien student who had seen and understood the truth about Earth.